Thank you very much, Roger, and thank you very much for inviting me this afternoon to come and speak to you. I sort of feel rather humbled in front of you all as media experts, and I'm just a retailer, really, so I'm just going to talk about shopping, if that's all right. Hopefully it is. So just to kick off a little bit about my background, as Roger sort of alluded to, I spent 13 years at Selfridges from the early 90s through to sort of 2004, when we completely revolutionized that store from what was a very dreary, old-fashioned department store to what is sometimes called one of the finest, well, certainly one of the finest stores now in the world, which is just fantastic. And I've also been on the board of ASOS for about 7 years, or just over 7 years, and I've seen that business grow from the day I joined, when its share price was 92 pence and it was turning over £30 million, and its share price today is over £30 and it's turning over 700 million, so fantastic. And I've spent some of my previous career in Freeman's, which was a mail order company, and some of the national multiples within the UK. So my intro now, and the speakers that are going to follow me are going to cover e-tailing sort of generally, a little bit of the interaction with social media, which is obviously very important, and then the final speaker will be talking about financial transactions and how that is dealt with. But my job really, because they're going to be more interesting than I am, is to really sort of set the scene, if you like. So I'm going to talk about 4 or 5 different areas. Firstly, just quickly, the sort of evolution of retail, and within that, how the customer experience has changed and the customer expectation has changed. Something on the impact of the arrival of the internet, which is obviously, a massive big thing for all retail businesses. And then, without wishing to be too parochial about the UK, because I'm sure it has parallels, in other parts of the world, let's talk a little bit about the impact that the internet is having on the traditional bricks world of retailing, the high street, as we would call it in the UK, and then something on the consumer expectations going forward. So let's just go back in time, and Roger, in his very helpful opening remarks this morning, sort of alluded to some of this and the history of how sort of commerce, if you like, and consumerism came together. I mean, for centuries, we've had the bazaars and markets. These were the original retail shops, if you like. And even today, these are the most exciting places to go to. If we travel abroad, we're not necessarily interested in the big shopping centre, because all too frequently that has the same stuff in it that we have at home. But we're always interested in the bazaars and markets, the fantastic sort of energy and atmosphere that conveys. And of course, you'll remember that, most of these bazaars and markets, they define the city centre. They were usually in the town square. You would have had the market on one side, the government building on the other side, maybe the church or the place of worship on another side, and then maybe an institution like a government building. But they did define the centre of so many of the great cities around the world. And then what happened after a while is that some of these market traders who are in the bazaar, moved into little sort of shops, as it were, that were covered up. And then a row of these shops would get sort of covered up en masse. And this really started to form, if you like, the sort of shopping arcade, if you like. And then from the shopping arcade came the department store, which is obviously a world that I know very well. And the department store gave you, as I'll come on to later, that fantastic opportunity to browse and see things inside, very often a building of fantastic architectural merit. Following on from that, you had the creation of specialty stores where, people said, well, look, I can do a women's wear offer for 20-year-olds or for 40-year-olds much better than it's being done in the department store, so I'm going to create this smaller store. And a number of those were very successful, obviously, nationally. And as you know today, with the likes of Zara and H&M, a great deal of them have now gone on to be very successful internationally. So the evolution of the customer experience. In the early 1900s, shopping, really was a chore. There's a program that's just finished on TV at the moment about Mr. Selfridge, who is the founder of Selfridges. And one of the things it does, which is quite interesting, is to remind everybody that, in the early 1900s, women were not allowed to go shopping on their own. Their seamstress or the lady who made her clothes would go shopping for fabric and then she'd take the fabric to the lady's house, and there they would make the clothes. So department stores were one of the first in the early 1900s to allow, firstly, women to come and shop on their own, and that they were free to browse, they did not have to buy, and that clothes suddenly became ready to wear. You could try on an item of clothing in your size, and you could take it away with you immediately. This was a real revolution. What also came over time was, the store opening hours got extended, but obviously physical stores generally are not open 24/7. Alongside this came the catalog business, or direct mail, if you like. Again, very strong in some parts, still very strong in some parts of Europe, in particular Germany. But in the UK in particular had really got connotations of sort of relatively low price, sometimes a poor selection, and very variable sort of quality. So the arrival of the internet has really brought this this shift and change in consumer behavior. And, it has started with the young people. I have two sons who are now in their 20s. When they were younger, they were using the internet for school. They went and used it for university. They obviously used it for Facebook and their social interaction and all the rest of it. And their natural inclination for everything they do is to start on the web. And that's having a rub-off effect on my generation too. I increasingly research things on the web before I go anywhere. And therefore, the web has the first chance or the first dibs or the first opportunity, to actually sell me something even before I get to a store. The web also, enables people to gather all this information. Before they could sort of cross the threshold of a store, they can research what's the products all around, where it's available, what the comparative pricing is, where their local stockist is. So fantastic. And as Deloitte's have recently done, they do an annual survey of what's going on the internet, particularly in the UK. The advent of price comparison sites, of online reviews, and the voucher code sites are changing the behavior of how people shop completely. And my final point, I suppose, about the impact of the internet compared to the bricks retailers is that, if you work in an office in London and you leave in the evening going back to the tube or the subway to go home, you pass 50 shop windows. Each one of those could or should have an opportunity to entice you inside to buy something. But on the web, unless you're on page 1 of Google or of your search, or you're in the first sort of 3 or 4 or 5 entries, you're nowhere. So it's really vital that you get up that listing, as I'm sure you know. So a bit about the high street, and I appreciate this is rather a UK term, and there are differences around the world in terms of how this is developing. But certainly in the UK, because internet retailing really is getting a huge impact and making huge inroads into traditional retailers. 10 years ago, if you were a fashion retailer in the UK, you would have said, I could cover the entire country probably with about 200, 250 stores. At that point, I would be mature. I would be accessing all the major consumer points around the country. But today, you only need 100 or at most 150 of those sites, plus obviously a transactional website. And this sort of paradigm, if you like, has changed forever. If we do come back, or when we come back rather, to better economics, the retailers are not all of a sudden going to charge out there and start opening shops again. This is not going to happen. So this paradigm has changed forever. And what's happening in the UK is a polarization towards the stronger centres. So, rents and the appetite for opening stores, whether you're in Oxford Street in central London, whether you're in Manchester, centre of Manchester, or Birmingham, or the big shopping centres like Bluewater, Trafford Centre in the UK, these are still managing to achieve very high rental levels because people want to be in those, places 1 to 100. And what's really happening is the places that are on my list, 101 to 300, they've got a real issue. They really have got a real issue. So not the death of the high street, but the high street is going to have to some high street locations are going to have to reinvent themselves. So let's just now move to the consumer again. One thing I think about the consumer now is they really do expect everything you sell in the store to be online. I mean, if it's not, it's sort of like, that's a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, why wouldn't you sell everything you have in the store online? But many retailers started off with that not being the case. The other thing that the internet helps you do, which is quite difficult to do in a store, is to actually articulate the proposition and the kind of history, the provenance, if you like, of not only your brand, but also the products that you sell. I mean, you can do that to a certain extent in the store visually by having great choice, by having nice shop fit, nice environment, and all the rest of it. But if you actually want to explain something, and it involves the use of words, that's quite difficult to do in a store because people don't tend to look at lots of words on a point of sale, piece of point of sale. But online, you can do that, and you can explain that. And actually, it's quite interesting sometimes to find out, why these products were created in the first place, and why this brand was created. And then that gives provenance and, if you like, authority to the products and the brand today. And the consumer is really forcing these retailers to be available for them. It is the advent of being able to buy anything from anywhere at any time, is just so powerful that actually, the retailers are just having to respond to this. Whereas before, they rather put people in silos. They sort of said, well, this is my store shoppers, and these are my internet shoppers, and this is my catalog shoppers. But actually, they're all the same person, all too frequently. And these, the established retailers are finding that, the likes of Amazon and eBay and ASOS in the UK and elsewhere, are putting a lot of pressure on them to actually, get their act together. So to conclude on my piece, we don't really know what maturity looks like. A lot of this is being made up as we go along. Nobody would have necessarily foreseen the fantastic take-up of mobile, but now it's there. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? And that is one factor that will continue to increase. There will continue to be this cannibalization from the brick stores towards the online. And the technology is still evolving. There are people trying, as we speak, to develop these sort of avatars or these apps, if you like, that will sit within particularly the pure play internet sites, where you will load up a picture of yourself, you'll give it 2 dimensions, your height and your weight, it will create an avatar, it will make it move, it will make it spin. So you can see what the clothes look like on you on the web, and this is all coming at some point. And finally, my last point would be, these consumers are really in control. It was quite interesting, about 11 o'clock I walked out of here to go back to the hotel just to check out, and I walked down the high street and the shop was shut. There was a Todd's and a Gucci store, and I thought, no, I was sort of in the mood to buy something, and it was shut. And I go, well, this is really odd. This is disappointing. So the consumer's expectations, have really changed, and the consumer is very much in control. Good. That, I think, concludes my piece. My next pleasurable job, is to introduce the first speakers to follow me. And we've got a double act coming here of a combination of Kit Kat and Facebook, I think it's described as. So we have Carolyn Everson, who's the Vice President of Global Marketing Solutions at Facebook, who's also worked for MTV and Primedia Inc., Zagat, and Walt Disney. And we have Stuart Dryber, who is a global marketing head for Kit Kat, which is obviously owned by Nestle. And he's also worked for Pepsi in his history. So Carolyn and Stuart, welcome.